Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
It's America's Heroes Group, Roundtable partner with Veteran Legislative Voice. Today is Saturday, November 13th, 2021. November is Military Family Appreciation and Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month. The host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a great show for you today. We have our partner, Ms. Stephanie Kalota. She's a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class veteran and founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. It's good to hear her voice again. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here with us. Now, this is something we can get into for a while. We can talk about this for a long, long time. Incarcerated veterans, that's another hot topic. Before we get into that, I want to let everybody know that they can see us on live on Facebook Live, and also they can see us on platforms like iHeartRadio. Just download the app and search America's Heroes Group. You can also watch us on digital TV on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and the Zondra's TV networks at ZONDRA. You can get that on Roku. Now, so there is estimated 107,000 veterans serving time in state and federal prisons. Right now, that was as of 2016, as a matter of fact, the majority, 98% of which are male. And then the majority of male veterans in each state, 56% are in federal, 53% prison served in the Army, and 53% served in the Army. And also, 1 out of 4 male veterans is 28%. 1 out of 4 males is in prison, federal prison. And also, 21% were combat veterans. 21% of the people serving in prison that are military veterans were participated in combat. So why do we have these high numbers? And also, what can be done to look at this problem? What are the issues stemming from? Is it mostly just bad choices people are making? Is it more psychological things that happen to them? Maybe they've had some emotional things or scars we can't see. What is the issue? What's going on?
Well, it's a combination of all things, and everybody's familiar with very popular issues that has happened in the military. Military sexual violence, people going homeless and having financial issues when they come out. A lot of veterans have chronic pain, and they were very hard hit. They had very hard hits back in the opioid crisis. So when they go through a lot of pain, the VA was very gracious in giving many painkillers out. But the thing is that then they started cutting them off, and that's when veterans started having to go from using painkillers, and many of them changed to drugs like heroin to pretty much cope with the pain. Many veterans have also done that transition from drugs to drugs and alcohol, and many have marijuana charges on them because that has been a source of relief for pain, mental health issues. It's a catch-all for a lot of things. And the thing is that a lot of people believe that people that go into prison and serve time are ones that have either gone to combat or they have bad conduct discharges or other than honorable discharges. But with the statistics, it shows that many of them had an honorable discharge, or general under honorable conditions. In the statistics that you said, only a quarter or a third, less than a third, actually have served.
Yeah.
Overseas, for wars. So it's a little bit different from a lot of people on how they understand it. Another statistic is that male veteran state prisoners are more than twice as likely as their non-veteran peers to be serving time for a violent sex crime. And that one is not very surprising for many of us that actually advocate for military sexual violence, because a lot of them do slip through the cracks through the military justice system, and they get out without, the sex offender registration or anything on their records about a sex offense. So they'll get out of the military and more than likely than not continue their circle of crime. And it's pretty frustrating and on that type of process. The other thing another statistic that is really important to go to, you did say it's 98% are men. The thing is that many studies focus on the men because there are more in the whole picture. But the problem is that women that serve time in prisons, they have a little bit more unique issues going on. Majority of them, over half, are victims to military sexual violence. There is a associate justice from California that is in the courts of appeal in California. She opined that it is likely that 100% of the women had multiple trauma experiences in their military careers, so physical, sexual, and war. And so one of those things is just really difficult. More than a third of veterans that serve in prisons were homeless. Yeah, and so it's a collection of many things, and they are the catch-all of the worst cases of everything that we're trying to advocate for the veterans. So it's really sad to find them and look for this. So it's up to the federal prison system and the states to take care of these veterans when they're in, because one of the things that not many people understand is that the VA will not treat nor pay VA disability to veterans that are in prison. Oh, wow. It's up to the state, local, and federal system that house these veterans. And the problem is that those systems don't understand veterans' needs.
So the thing is, this I think is interesting, is that we have this connection with going back to MST. We talked about that in a couple of segments earlier. So you have a situation where people are suffering from military sexual trauma, and then it's a crazy disparity between how the women are treated and what they go through, and how a lot of the offenders, a lot of the men that are the offenders, and what they go through. Although men do also suffer from military sexual trauma, it does happen to men, and and people are finding out that it's happened alarmingly higher than what people realize. That is way more pervasive than people ever gave credit for. I think they're reporting something like 20%, or maybe it was less than 10%, but some people are saying it could be as high as 30%.
And then the other
veterans that have had experiences that could have ended really badly if they weren't able to defend themselves. But the thing of it is that so you see these guys that are committing crimes in the military, sexual crimes in the military, then getting out and doing the same thing in the civilian world. But then you have the women that are getting discharged from the military because they were trying to report it, being discharged and not getting honorable discharges and things like that, and now ending up in the prison system because they have a lot of trauma from a lot of the abuse that they suffered in the military.
Yes, and they often go, and it's actually pretty common for military sexual trauma victims to go homeless after they leave the military. Justice Moore also, she found that the longer you stay in the military, more than likely you will not go into prison. So the problem is that these victims of military sexual violence are typically in their first contract. They are young, under the age of 24, and so they're going to serve the least amount of time, which will actually increase their chances to going into prison.
That's depressing. So should a person, and there's this push right now that for people to go back, we talked about this earlier as well, to go back and try to, if they have claims for MST, to try to see if they can refile claims, because now the military is taking a slightly different stance and being a little bit more open to look at some of the claims that were denied for MST. So people that could now get submit a new claim and hopefully get benefits for MST, so they can get the counseling, the support, maybe help get reintegrated back into society, get education benefits, compensation benefits, work training programs, things like that, actual monetary compensation, those types of things, along with medical treatment, things along those lines. Do you think that a person needs an attorney when they file a claim or try to get a claim re-looked at? Is it a good idea to talk to an attorney?
Yes. So I'll give you a little bit about my background on VA disability, because we don't talk about that so much. I actually used to help a lot of veterans, and also when I worked for the Army Reserve as a DoD civilian, we had a lot of veterans come out of the active duty and then come to our reserve unit to continue to serve or part of their contract, because I was on Fort Lewis. So the majority of the people that we got were prior active duty. And so I helped many people out with their VA disability. And later, after I left the Army Reserve, medically retired and left as a DoD civilian, I worked for some time for a VA disability law firm and helped them out and basically worked for them and helped a whole lot of veterans. So the thing is that when a veteran files a claim, it's best, I do recommend to go to a VSO or a state vet center rep, because majority of the VA disability lawyers only receive any compensation on a claim that had been denied first. So they can help, but they won't be compensated. And many do pro bono work, because I did a few pro bono work for a few veterans that their mental health was so terrible they had trouble filling out the form itself. So I helped a few of them actually prove that. And yes, military sexual violence is one of the most difficult ones to file. Women veterans are disproportionately getting denied more for PTSD than men, because majority of their PTSD is from military sexual violence and they never filed for it. So it's a catch-22 for a lot of women as well. But the VA, they actually came up with a few things to help veterans on how to do this. So the most common one, of course, is, reporting and getting that done. But the other one is that you can prove that there are markers in your VA disability. And I use it for I like to use it for PTSD as well. For other things other than just military sexual violence, for stateside trauma issues, because a few veterans in the past, they react to plane crashes back in the 80s and 70s, and those people had gotten PTSD for that. So markers are anything that shows a change with your mental health, and that could be a decrease of professional performance measures, the evaluations, the annual evaluations you get. Going AWOL is a good example. Getting enrolled into the alcohol and substance program, ASAP. That's a very common one to also do, because that's how a lot of people try to cope with mental health issues without going in to get mental health treatment, because it is a stigma. And that's one of the things that I pointed out for the prison, for those that are incarcerated, is that mental health was such terribly stigmatized in the past. They're terrified they're going to lose their security clearance, that they're going to be treated differently. When I first started getting mental health treatment while I was activated as an Army reservist, I told everybody I was going to get dental work. And only my boss, my supervisor, knew where I was actually at. And thank God he did not treat me differently because of it.
Wow.
So.
So this is the thing. So you're familiar with restricted versus non or unrestricted claims?
Yes. I was formerly a SARC, a sexual assault response coordinator. So yes, there's restricted and unrestricted, and those came out after the 2013 congressional hearings that was happening in 2013 and 14. So there's two ways to file. You can file an unrestricted, which means, everybody's going to be notified. It's best to do that filing within the first 24 hours of the actual assault, because there's DNA evidence. There's a lot of evidence that you can get to build up your case. And then the MPs will know, the command will know. They're not supposed to really know they're supposed to know your name, but they're not supposed to know all the other details. Unrestricted, no one knows except for the medical or a chaplain or a friend, because they've also have, expanded that little confidant system, and you can tell a friend and family members. You can actually talk about that with unrestricted. The problem is that the friend or family members or someone else that knows, as soon as it becomes public, it has to be forced into unrestricted. And so that can be very traumatic for the survivors as they go through that process, because they can still get mental health treatment and all of the other treatments that you can get, because many have to go get screened for STDs after an assault and get treatment for that. So a lot of times that trauma, when they go through from going restricted to unrestricted, is very difficult. There's another great program that came out in the last couple of years, and it's the CATCH program. So they catch the serial offenders. So current people that file for
before you go into
unrestricted,
that, before you move on to the CATCH, so when you have an unrestricted claim, an unrestricted claim means basically it's out there. Everybody knows about it. So maybe your commander might know about it. Maybe the commander is the one that did it. or maybe all the people that are involved and their buddies know about it. If it's restricted, it means it's basically everything is private.
Yes,
but if it's
that is very true.
But if it's restricted, does that mean it's still being looked into? Is it still being investigated, or is it like shelved or tabled? Okay, so it's basically shelved or tabled.
Yeah.
So at least either everybody knows what happened, and you brought through the gauntlet of shame and ridicule and maybe fighting for your job or whatever, and all that other backlash that can come from that, or you keep it private, but nothing that really gets done about it.
Yes, and you can't seek any military protective orders while you have a restricted claim as well. So it's actually really common for people in the chain of command or supervisors or just a higher ranking person to be the predator. And it's also common that the predators also live in the same barracks as the survivor. Wow. So those type of things can get really scary. So a lot of survivors face that trivial decision, and some do choose the unrestricted route because it, A, gives them some protections, B, they can get a PCS. There has been problems in the past with that issue because there was one lady that was stationed in Korea that filed an unrestricted report on being raped by people that in her barracks. And they never instituted a military protective order. She filed for the PCS, and they took over 80 days to do it while she was still living in the same barracks as the alleged offenders. And later, after she PCS'd to Fort Carson, she was told that that she has to come back for the trial, which is actually not true. And so the day before she was supposed to go, she committed suicide.
Wow.
And her mother is still fighting for those, for more changes in the military justice system to help with future survivors, future victims.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We've also had a lot of cases where the woman was actually attacked or even killed by the offender.
Yes, later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, many actually receive reprisal and many threatening things, and it's pretty scary. The FY19 DoD SAPA report showed that they did a study for reprisal cases, and over 60% of those that actually did retaliation against the survivor when they report were in the chain of command, superior to the victim, and sometimes actual, commander and first sergeant themselves.
Wow. So going back to this catch situation, so they can catch. So we got two things about this conversation. We're talking about incarcerated veterans. So we do have people out there that should be behind bars. And then we also have veterans that are out there that maybe made some bad choices that aren't necessarily bad people, but just making bad choices and maybe going through a rough time psychologically, or maybe in their financial situation, which leads them to do desperate things. So how do we separate these two groups? Who are these veterans who are incarcerated? Do we have more of the guys that belong there, or are there guys that really just going through a bad time that maybe need some support, some kind of legal support? To get their stories told.
That part I'm not very familiar with. They're actually the oral history for incarcerated veterans.
You broke up a little bit. Can you repeat what you say? You broke up a little bit.
Yes. So there is a group that does oral history on incarcerated veterans. So you can get a lot of information from them. I'm very new with that group. Incarcerated Veterans Oral History Project. They're on Facebook. The organizer of this is Jason Higgins, and what he's doing is gathering all the stories and so everybody can understand the background of those incarcerated veterans on how they get to that point.
Mm-hmm. And there's the CATCH program. Is that doing a good job of finding offenders in the military?
Yes, actually it is. So current people that file a report, they have the option of doing that. They're also calling past reportees, past survivors, to find out whether they would like to opt into the CATCH program, and that's been a very big thing, especially when they start doing DNA tests and you can start seeing the connections from a lot of different assaults.
And you said most of this is habitual guys. These are guys that are serial offenders. Typically, they get tried.
Once they can get away with the first one, or just something that's not so bad, and then it's a downward spiral from there. And so, one of the things that while I was ASARC, a sexual assault response coordinator, was that the training sessions, we try to educate people on what really is assault, how does it get there, what is acceptable, what's not, because there are veterans that make terrible decisions on sexual assault, and it becomes sexual assault when they didn't mean to, because a lot of times men or women, they get somebody drunk because they think that they're not going to accept them while they're sober. And so those instances, we try to really talk about consent. And there's a great little video called "Consent is Tea." Tea is consent, and it talks about something similar, but just so innocent, of forcing a person to drink tea. What if they didn't want tea? What if they decide once they get the tea that they don't want to drink it right then? Those type of instances of consent is very easy to help younger veterans or younger service members to understand how to approach things like that.
Wow. So tell us how to get a hold of your group, and also get information about the Veterans Legislative Voice.
Yeah, so I have Veteran Legislative Voice on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I also have my own website, vetslegislativevoice.org, VETS. I've been doing a lot of updating, and what I've been doing is studying every single bill that's in Congress right now that is related to military and veterans, and I'm highlighting a good portion of them on what could actually make some great change.
And so, one more last thing, what should we be doing? In the last minute or so we have you on the line, what is something that we should be doing right now in regards to incarcerated veterans? What do you your call to action to the veteran community, the civilian community, what should we be doing?
We should force our Congress people to make the VA change to provide that care to incarcerated veterans. The VA, as good and bad of everybody's experiences, they're the ones that understand veterans. They need to be treating our veterans inside the system. And then also many people that is incarcerated, they don't receive VA disability payments as well. So they're going to be faced with a lot of fees and issues that happens while they're incarcerated, and they're not going to be getting that compensation that could actually help them to transition out of the system.
And then also one last thing too is, so what would you say to women who are, because we're on the topic of MST, when I was talking about incarcerated veterans, what would you say to women to encourage them to come forward to file claims about MST? Do you think it's beneficial? Are the benefits worth the risk or worth the process?
It depends on on where they're at in their environment. Many do. If they're concerned about the reaction to them filing, I always recommend to file restricted until they transfer to a unit, and then do the unrestricted. Go under unrestricted, which is an option for restricted people. They have the option later on in their career, anytime in their life, they can switch to unrestricted. I do recommend to get in to see a hospital so they can get that rape kit done as soon as the incident happens, because that is the biggest evidence for anyone's case. And a lot of times survivors and victims do not go do that because they're terrified of getting caught while they're there, or that maybe they'll minimize the actual assault. Those type of things happen, and that's one of the reasons that most cases are thrown out, is because there's not enough actual material evidence and everything is circumstantial.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier getting that rape kit is done. You should do that within 24 hours. Is there a time limit on when you can have a restricted claim versus unrestricted, or is there a time limit or a statute of limitations on when a person can step forward and say, hey, something happened to me?
No, sir. They actually did a Supreme Court hearing last year, I believe, and they state that there are 0 statute of limitations for a rape that happens in the military. In the last decade, there's been a lot of cases that have been coming up for survivors filing against their drill sergeants while they're in basic and AIT in the 80s and 90s, and they've been winning their cases because the statute of limitations was thrown out.
Stephanie, thanks for your time. Really appreciate you telling us all this information. We really appreciate your voice. Stephanie Kalota, nice to see you again.
Thank you so much.
She's a great partner and a great voice regarding information, legislative information. Great job, Steph, as always.